Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this. And I just realized sitting here that I come to nature by numbers without a single figure on my slides. So that's significant for my talk. Yeah, I will give you a basic lecture, very basic in human geography, and then talk something about the recent IPBES assessment of values. And you'll see how that connects together. Because kind of think about this, the topic for this seminar, my take on it is, well, how then to address context, human dimensions in addressing biodiversity values. And I will be biodiversity biased in my talk, because that's kind of the field I know. Yeah, and this is kind of my summary. It's certainly very important that industry and financial markets engage with biodiversity. It's crucially important and much needed, but it triggers some concerns or a couple of fears, to put it more blunt. And one is that application of one-size-fits-all measures is kind of, you hear it in the air, but the word is diverse, and it consists of over kind of overlapping number of specific landscape with specific context, with the socio-economic and physical and biological features into it. And how then to take care of this diversity if you work with metrics? That's kind of, it's not often very kind of easy to take care of the dynamic or the variation. And another thing is that, well, this measure of nature we're talking about, it's I mean, there are figures on nature that you could put on in many ways, but what is often missed out is the human dimensions and impacts of humans and humans in this. I will come back to that also as well. And it's for diverse context, so to speak. Well, it's when we hear in this cold part of the earth that you shouldn't eat meat because it gets climate impact. But here we have specific conditions for semi-natural grasslands that needs grazing for keeping them up. So you should eat the right meat. Well, if you think it's ethically right to eat other species, of course, or other animals, but to stop it would be not good for biodiversity in our part of the world. And for the measuring of human aspect, just to give an example, well, if you talk about ecological compensation, biodiversity offsets, or well, if you say you're going to protect 30% of the terrestrial area of the world, well, what about the humans engaged there and living there and getting their maybe subsistence farming out of there? So how to take care of that so we don't kind of neglect that part of the sustainability, so to speak. And to be very basic then, as I said, I depart in my research from landscape as a kind of holistic framing of contextually related place-based related features. And some of these you can measure, carbon sequestrations, how much you produce for timber, the food production to some extent at least, nutrient cycling and so on. But together, I mean, the holistic perspective and how it works together is more than the kind of the sum of its part. It's certainly, as there is, as up to the right, some aspects that are much harder to measure. That's also part of the nature's contributions to people: recreation, healing, education, place identity, social cohesion, and so on. That also relates to this. That is much harder to capture and figure. So some you can put numbers on, some you can't. But the overall problem is also that how to kind of bring in the holistic perspective and what this place is more than kind of adding figures. And come to that, and then the landscape varies considerably. This is obvious, of course. And these 4 pictures just illustrates 4 various parts of Sweden. They're all illustrating semi-natural grasslands by the grazing. So it's kind of one similar kind of land use, only in Sweden. Still very different. It's still very different context in as for the biophysical aspects, but also for the human aspects. And of course, this grows in size and diversity if we get to totally other parts of the world with other social and ecological contexts. Added to that then, the people who relate to these, they vary. And even more so. I mean, then they vary their knowledge, the perspectives, and the capacities, and also the capabilities of doing change in the landscape. There could be farmers, but various kinds of farmers in various farming systems. There could be reindeer herders. There could be visitors. And if we say visitors and recreationists, that's also a long tradition. So that's not the land use that we should neglect, but also important for the, at least in the global north, the urban population to connect and to realize how they kind of relate and are dependent on the rest of nature. So these has to be taken into consideration, I would argue, also to find a solution, and also when it comes to kind of finding ways to relate metrics and numbers or measuring, and to be maybe, I'm not sure if it could be made in this, well, I doubt it could be made into metrics, but you need to find a system where this is also captured. Otherwise, we will not find the kind of the sustainable pathway forward. Coming to IPBES values assessment, as it's called, and I wasn't part of the authors, but I had the role of pointing the authors, and we read the SPM. But still, I think this is my reading of it, based on what I just said, and not just mine. Also, those orange citations are directly from the report of the summary of it. It clearly shows, and that is what you have been mentioned before, that economic and political systems or decisions has not been, that has been prioritizing to a large degree nature-based instrumental values. And this is, of course, tightly linked to the problem that we have a biodiversity crisis. They've used a narrow set of values, and this report then suggests to be able to open up and to understand better, and hopefully then address how to kind of bring in other ways of valuing, and hopefully to bring the into the financial and economic system, is to reveal the kind of the difference by the typology. And here is suggestions of the typology, looking at, I mean, starting with the world views, and realize that we see and read the word differently, that we have different kind of broad values, and some are equal, like for hopefully justice, human well-being. Then looking into specific values, so we're looking into the instrumental values, to the nature-based or nature resource values, or more into the relational values, how we have a good relation with the rest of nature. And then on top, the value indicators that we kind of need to take into consideration. And then from this, think about people's diverse ways of valuing nature. With what's emphasized in the report is then that if we don't take the kind of local context, the people's values into consideration, and this very much speaks to the global south then conditions, but also to the north here, then we risk having conflicts, and we certainly risk having not the optimal outcomes if we don't take those the humans in the landscapes into consideration. This is a complicated figure, maybe you won't see it good in the back here, but in the report suggests 4 leverages, or they assess or synthesize that there are 4 leverages that could help us when it comes to transformative change, then to find better kind of the sustainable paths forward. And one is to undertake evaluation when also considering the diverse ways of valuing nature. That will be a kind of more of an incremental change of how we work with looking for how to measure nature. But second, and that make even more impact, and that is then to meaningfully find ways to include it in this decision making. Third, the kind of step to the right, or is it to the left, is to make the institutions embrace these kinds of values. So it's not just kind of a method, but also in the institutional setting. And kind of the biggest arrow pointed down that will be also contributing to a big impact is to discuss and mobilize and have kind of open for what kind of values and shift on paradigms, what kind of norms and attitudes do we have to work on broadly in society, not just by measuring on nature, but also in kind of what is a good human life in relations to the rest of nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie, for giving us perspective. And how do we get these aspects when it comes to humans, when it comes to well-being, when it comes to democracy, distributive justice? How do we get that into the models, the tools, the metrics, our understanding, our way of talking about these things?
Well, as I said before, I'm not sure it can be. I'm not enough familiar with the models you refer to, but as for the metrics, it might have to be a parallel process. So just realize as a metric is shown in typologies is one part of it, and then it needs to be combined with other aspects that we do some kind of narrative measuring or in other ways. And the tricky thing, and there I have much less of an answer, is, as also Ryong mentioned, to bring in the local perspectives and the local kind of how to take care of the local context, since it varies all over the globe. So it's kind of a general measuring would make harm in so many parts. It might work in some of them, but in general it would make more harm in most parts of the world. What is, and that is, has been said in social science for a long time, is of course that participation, raising awareness, but also engage and make a kind of a shared ownership of the issue. That certainly we know much more easily said than done.
Can it also be changing? You brought up narratives. Yeah. Could it be how we word things when it comes to all these policies now? And you brought up coherence, Ryong, alignment. But could it be that we can shift also our narratives to include, as we are going to support them, the kind of trying to... Is that something, a development of the narratives and how we approach these things?
I have follow on the narrative, which was my question. Because, I mean, the general narrative is about we have to save the planet, we have to save nature, we have to save biodiversity. But maybe it is about saving human well-being or even our survival. And that narrative has to come out there.
It has to come at the same time. That's very clear in all IPBES work, I would say, and also what I said in as a human geographer, not just related to IPBES, but also to the broad set of research. Because I mean, we know that as for indigenous people, they are kind of overrepresented in the numbers of people being killed for protecting the environment. There was, together with the values assessment, there was an assessment from IPBES accepted on the sustainable use of wild species that showed that we need to work on poverty, democracy. These aspects helps a more healthy relation to the rest of nature. But I also think, well, relating back to your question, is that we might need to less think on one size fits all in narratives and concepts, because I do believe that certainly I'm convinced by the previous speeches that you need to have kind of hard measures in some respect to the business or financial world, but you need to be able to combine that with other ways of working in policy making, but also towards people, because you need, if you want to have your message come through, you need to think about the receiver of the message, how to engage them, not what you want to say, but how that is received and what action that will make.
So here comes also behavioral psychology, and policy making and scientists.
It won't make. So I realize what I say won't make this easier or quicker.
No, but maybe
but
it is a critical step towards action.
Yeah, and it will get more right. Otherwise, there's such a big risk we get very much wrong in many aspects.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.